God. Yeah. All right. It's fine. Look, we're going to pretend that didn't happen. Watch. Reset. What's up, guys? We're going to talk today about things. What's up, sons? It's Blind Run with Son of a Tech once again, and welcome to the Crypto Mining Show, your one-stop shop for all cryptocurrency news from the perspective of a cryptocurrency miner. As I stated previously in the intro, I am Blind Run. That is what I go by on the interwebs, as that is my gamer tag. Other than that, I go by Matthew in real life. Today, we're going to be talking about Phoenix Miner releasing a new miner. Then we're going to be talking about the White House in damage control mode. I think you guys should be aware, of course, of the inflation reports that are supposed to be released today. And that is going to have an impact on crypto markets. So we're going to talk about it. Yes, it's politics. Yes, I'm the only crypto mining channel that covers politics. But hey, somebody's got to do it. So I guess it's going to be me. Then we're going to talk about the Ethereum merge. All things Ethereum merge. Where are we at? How far along are we? Is it being delayed? Tim Beiko seems to think so. We're going to be talking about that and his tweets, along with tweets from other members of the development community. Let's get into it right after a word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Crypto.com. Crypto.com is my go-to centralized exchange for liquidating my crypto assets. With their Crypto.com Visa debit card, I can load up my mined Ethereum to pay for power and other operating costs quickly while earning up to 8% cash back. In addition to the Visa debit card, there are additional fiat options, including wire transfers, to easily receive your profits. Crypto.com also offers additional services, including trading and even staking, to earn additional revenue on your investments. Join 10 million plus users buying and selling 100 plus cryptocurrencies at true cost by using my affiliate link in the description for a $25 funding bonus. Or enter referral code SOAT at sign up for the same bonus. Remember, cryptocurrency investment comes with significant risks, so do your own research. All right, welcome back, everybody, and be sure to use the affiliate link down below so you support the channel. Crypto.com is a long-term sponsor, and I appreciate their help tremendously. Other than that, I also appreciate y'all's help for keeping the channel alive during what is the weirdest side move market that we've seen in quite some time. Be sure to hit the like and share the video out because I'm dependent on y'all for the support. Let's go ahead and get into the first topic for today. Miner releases. We have Phoenix Miner coming out with a new one 22 hours ago. They fixed an issue with expired SSL certificate that led to certificate verify failed errors when connecting to some pools, notably Ethermine, when using SSL connections. Now the miner will send SSL SNI hostname, which may be needed by some pools for SSL certificate validation, to go back to the old behavior, no SNI hostname. Use the new command line parameter, no SNI. They also added support for the latest AMD Windows driver up to version 22.4.1 and some other small fixes that they say they made but did not make any notes surrounding them. So if you guys have been using Phoenix Miner, there's a new update. It's been a while since I've used Phoenix Miner personally. They seem to have fallen to the wayside quite some time ago and been replaced by things like Team Red Miner for AMD GPUs. And then on the NVIDIA side, you have T-Rex Miner and of course LOL Miner, which is one of my favorite for just across the board, works for everything almost. That's kind of where I sit. Now, T-Rex Miner apparently has a new beta that has really, really good light hash rate unlocks. I have not tried it out. I'm going to wait for the official release more than likely, just due to some of the various areas that are, I would call, a little bit more sketchy for download in general. Let's get into inflation rates, White House in damage control mode as crypto markets brace for an 8% plus inflation. And we did a poll surrounding this yesterday. Obviously, some of it was just incredibly inflated, like I was saying, like 40%. It's really hard to track inflation, I think, because the numbers can be kind of manipulated in a lot of different forms. So even when we talk about 8%, the effects of that on the market for things like groceries, whatever else it may be, gas, of course, and so on, may be a lot more pronounced. And because, of course, gas runs the entire economy, everything else kind of goes up and follows there. So usually when I'm looking at inflation and what it's doing, I'm looking at the price of gas and how that affects everything down the line. Let's get into this article, though, from CoinDesk. And of course, they say White House blames Russia's war on Ukraine for the extraordinary elevated inflation to be revealed by Tuesday's data from the Labor Department. The Biden administration is in damage control mode ahead of the latest inflation data, which is likely to show the cost of living soared in March and bolster recession fears. Quote, we expect March CPI headline inflation to be extraordinarily elevated due to Russian President Vladimir Putin's price hike, end quote, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters on Monday. Quote, we expect a large difference between the core and the headline inflation, reflecting the global disruptions in energy and food market caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's pretty funny how they keep harping on Russia's invasion of Ukraine and they don't talk about depleting our oil reserves or any of these other factors that have been going on, or even the COVID stuff and all of the lockdowns and so on affecting this at all, which I feel like is a delayed effect to it. And you would think that they would want to point that out as well, just due to the timeline of presidencies and parties in control and so on. Either way, we'll continue. The data due on Tuesday at 12:30 UTC is forecast to reveal the Consumer Price Index, CPI, which is defined as the change in prices of a basket of goods and services typically purchased by specific groups of households, increased by 8.3% year on year in March, following February's 7% rise, according to data source FX Street. The above 8% figure would be the first in at least 4 decades. The core inflation, which strips out the volatile food and energy component, is expected to have risen 6.6% year on year versus 6.4% in February. According to Psaki, the disparity between the two metrics would stem from an abnormal increase in gas prices last month. Quote, at times, gas prices were more than $1 above pre-invasion levels, so that roughly 25% increase in gas price will drive tomorrow's inflation reading, end quote, Psaki said. The White House is warning of a big bump in the headline CPI due to the volatile food and energy component is perhaps aimed at calming market nerves ahead of the data. Risk assets, including Bitcoin, have come under pressure in the lead up to the CPI release on fears that an above 8% reading would strengthen the case for faster rate hikes and balance sheet runoff by the Federal Reserve. Last week, Federal Reserve Governor Lael Brainerd said, quote, bringing inflation down is of paramount importance, end quote. Brainerd struck a hawkish tone, favoring interest rate increases and a rapid balance sheet runoff to bring U.S. monetary policy to a, quote, more neutral position, end quote, later this year. Psaki's comments perhaps indicate the White House expects the headline inflation to cool in the coming months as the panic in the energy market has faded. Gas prices in the U.S. have pulled back to $4.11 per gallon from the record high of $4.33 per gallon hit on March 11th, according to the American Automobile Association. The West Texas Intermediate crude traded at $96 per barrel at press time, down 23% from the high of $123 seen a month ago, per charting platform TradingView. Energy prices had surged after Russia invaded Ukraine in late February. It remains to be seen if investors take cognizance of the White House's view and remain calm in case of an above 8% CPI print. A big miss on expectations could restore risk on sentiment in markets. That said, the jury is out on returns of animal spirits in asset markets. Given the growing consensus that the era of low inflation and cheap liquidity may be behind us. quote, we may be on the cusp of a new inflationary era, end quote, Augustin Carstens, general manager of the Bank for International Settlements, said in a speech earlier this month. Quote, the forces behind high inflation could persist for some time. New pressures are emerging, not least from labor markets, as workers look to make up for inflation-induced reductions in real income. Quote, it seems clear that policy rates need to rise to levels that are more appropriate for a higher inflation environment. Quote, most likely, this will require real interest rates to rise above neutral levels for a time in order to moderate demand, end quote, Carstens added. So the big note here, I think from our perspective, like as cryptocurrency enthusiasts and so on, is going to be like whether or not Bitcoin does its job that was originally intended, which is to hedge against inflation. What we've seen kind of in the past is it doesn't seem to be doing that, and it seems to be following traditional markets. Once again, there should be a distinction between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, in my humble opinion, just due to the fact that it functions in a form that is more fundamental to the base ideals of cryptocurrency, because it is the first one, peer-to-peer and without interference of governments and banks and that sort of thing, as opposed to something like Ethereum, where we see definitely big VCs and so on participating within it, and it sticks more, in my opinion, to a technology. And so fine if it wants to follow the stock market. But like I said, unfortunately, what we have seen historically is Bitcoin following essentially just the traditional markets. So how the traditional markets respond will probably have an impact on the way Bitcoin in particular responds to whatever the reports end up being at this point. Now, if I'm speaking and we have already gotten the report, I don't know what 1230 UTC would be in translation in my time. Right now, I'd have to look it up, but maybe near the end of the show, we'll double check, make sure nothing's been reported on, and then kind of move from there. Hopefully, Bitcoin does end up being a hedge against inflation. One of the notes that I would like to make here, though, too, is we are not really seeing the response from Bitcoin in relation to the super cycle that we normally see. Typically, it's a 4-year cycle, and it is based around the halving of Bitcoin, and it affects the entire cryptocurrency market. So when this happens, essentially right after the halving, which is a reduction in the minted Bitcoin that's paid out to miners for solving blocks, you see a sharp increase in the price of Bitcoin. That'll go up for a couple years, and then after that, what you will see is a big dip off, which we should be seeing here around this time of year, and then it'll be flat for a couple years before the next halving. Problem being, of course, there is that you have that big dip. What does the dip normally go to? Well, it usually goes to the previous all-time highs. The previous all-time high that we saw last cycle was 21,000 for Bitcoin. So you would have expected by now, it's getting into April, you would have expected Bitcoin to be a lot closer to 20K than it is to the 40K that it is right now. And so if we do take that into consideration, what we could say is due to compounded factors between the super cycle and, of course, what we're seeing in the economy, we are sitting at 40,000, which is much more than we would normally be at, meaning that we could see much higher rises at the next halving of Bitcoin. And that's just like, obviously not financial advice, just kind of an extrapolation of the data that I have with my very rudimentary understanding of how all of these things are put together. And hopefully I articulated that well enough. So let's go ahead and talk about Ethereum and the merge. Everybody's going to be interested in the merge. And you're clicking on this video because we said Tim, who is a developer for Ethereum, says that we are not going to see the merge, or the merge will not happen in June. This comes as a surprise after the success of the shadow fork on the mainnet yesterday. So, as you can see here is the quote from Tim, and this was posted yesterday at 3:09 p.m., April 11th, 2022. in response to, I think the sentiment you guys are trying to convey are too optimistic. It's not healthy when the community later will hear that the merge is not likely to happen around June or July. Be realistic to what the real situation is. To which Tim replies, the merge will not happen in June. Currently has 31 likes and about 7 retweets. This could be great, fantastic news, or it could be a troll, I suppose, but I doubt it coming from Tim. So I do realize that some people are like, well, then it could happen in May. Let me tell you why it's not going to happen in May, okay? The reason it's not going to happen in May is per the dev call on Friday that we already reported on Sunday, the plan would be as follows. On April 29th, they would determine if they are going to basically delay the difficulty bomb or move forward with the merge. If on April 29th they decided to move forward with the merge, they would start upgrading testnets every 2 weeks fully over to proof of stake. And basically there are 4 major testnets that would be moved over before they would move into actually moving the mainnet. So the best I could get from the timeline on that is starting April 29th, you would have 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks for 4 times. I believe it would be somewhere between 8 and 10 weeks total. And if we're talking about May, that would be May, June, and then July. So it would happen really at the beginning of July. So this is kind of a weird spot to be in. Why else would it happen in the beginning of July as well? Well, that would be because the difficulty bomb would go off in May and start to increase the block times. If those block times get above 15 seconds, Ethereum is in big trouble. They say that's the hard stop. The absolute hard stop is end of July, which would be 17 seconds for the block time. So they would have to be done with it before July. So if we have the timeline needed for the test nets to be upgraded, but it's not going to start until after April 29th, and that those weeks would push us into July, but we couldn't upgrade in July because the block times would already be too high. And Tim is saying that the merge will not happen in June. More than likely, what I am getting from this is that there will be some sort of delay. Now, not the all core devs meeting, but the consensus meeting for the devs on Friday, another note was made that they could do a short, soft kind of fork to delay the bomb. It would be like a soft bomb delay for 2 weeks is what they had said in the call. That doesn't seem realistic to me either, because that would push you out to, I guess, maybe second week of July, somewhere around there, but that is on the table. So we could see a soft delay that would be a short 2-week delay of the bomb, and then you would essentially have till the second week of July to mine till. That would be the absolute earliest from my interpretation of the data that's been provided to me that I can give you guys. Other than that, if we go with a full-on bomb delay, typically those are going to give us around 5 to 6 months. And that would be from the time of May, not from June. So you would be about 5 to 6 months from May, which would put you around October. And that is pretty much where we're at with the timelines and the options that are happening. I'm fairly confident from the data and from what Tim is saying here that there will not be a merge in June. I think that it could be a troll from the perspective of it maybe happening in July with that short-term possibility that they did state in the call, but this is where we're at. How confident are we that the merge is going to be successful and ready to go, or successful enough on the test nets that it's going to be ready to go and be done sometime this year? And that's kind of where I get to the point of, I think that we are looking at it being successful enough for them to push forward here for the year 2022. And that's because, well, if we take a look, we can see that the testnet has done pretty good. We are very close to a historical event. We're testing proof of stake on Ethereum. Today will be the first mainnet shadow fork ever, and they're roughly at 690 blocks, 2 hours away from the TTD. And then we do have that pulled up. It was run yesterday. It was successful. The average block times were 13.2 seconds, so under that 15-second block time that I think they were trying to make as far as that is determined. You can check that out here on this Explorer for the mainnet Shadow Fork 1. And then we do have, of course, this statement, which is the mainnet Shadow Fork already found an issue that we could have easily missed. The default gas limit is set to 8 million, but miners voted it up to 30 million. Since most validators would run with this default value, the gas limit would quickly drop. So they did find something here. This would be influenced, of course, by the miners. It should be noted that they are going to have to put in a fix for that. So there's a few other fixes that are going on here. Let's try to get the best roadmap information that we can now, though. So Tim, luckily, did give us an ETH Roadmap FAQ. It's basically a brain dump here of everything that we should need to know about the merge, timing of the merge, and where we're at. So we're going to go through it. I just wanted to give you guys the summary at the beginning so you understand what my timeline is that I'm looking at, how I'm interpreting the data. If you disagree with the data, let me know, of course, in the comment section or in the live chat. We can discuss it near the end. But so you are as informed as possible, let's go through the Ethereum Roadmap FAQ. This is on GitHub from Tim, and it says non-exhaustive. If there's a question you'd like answered, please add it as an issue PR. Feel free to submit Q&As as a PR too. And then full disclaimer, this current version was typed in less than 1 hour and will likely have typos and minor inaccuracies. What actually went on with the Kiln merge? Like mainnet, Kiln was launched with separate proof of work and proof of stake chains. It ran through the merge and now operates fully under proof of stake. Did Kiln actually follow the current spec for the mainnet merge? By this, I mean, was it relevant to what will happen with the mainnet merge? i.e., does it follow the same spec of the Bellatrix fork? And he says, yes, we did make some minor changes to the spec after Kiln was live, but they were backwards compatible. The current specs for the network can be found here, which you guys can check out if you want. Links in the description. We don't expect major spec changes now and strongly recommend tooling, infrastructure, application developers test on Kiln to ensure their products work as expected in a post-merge Ethereum context. Then goes on to say in the second bullet point that it seems like the Kiln testnet beacon chains has state and smart contracts. This runs contrary to what the Ethereum org suggests about the beacon chain. Is this simply because I am confused by the block explorers? And he says post-merge beacon blocks contain the transactional payload that current proof of work blocks contain. We call this the execution payload in the specs. Here's a diagram which illustrates what it looks like. And you guys can go pick up that if you like. He does clarify on the above, the first two blocks on proof of work and the beacon chain are pre-merge, and the last two are after the merge. Once the last proof of work block is produced, subsequent beacon chain blocks include the transactional data. At a high level, what does the block processing flow look like post-merge? A validator is elected to propose a block. This validator asks its execution layer via the engine API to send him an execution payload. The execution layer returns the payload, which contains the most profitable set of valid transactions to the consensus layer. The CL proposes a block which includes this payload and propagates it on the beacon chain P2P network. Notes, individual transactions are still gossiped on the execution layer P2P network, and the execution layer is solely in charge of maintaining the transaction pool. Full blocks get propagated on the CL, which is, golly, why did I miss that up already? And so you have essentially, I'm derping here. Yeah, you have your execution layer and the consensus layer. Sorry. Ugh. Yeah. So the validator specifies the address on the execution layer at which they want to receive the fees. Transaction fees never get locked on the beacon chain like the validator's stake and rewards do. Other validators attest to the block and, if valid, propagated on the beacon chain P2P network. What is the testing process like for the merge? We are running several testing efforts in parallel, a list available here. So shadow forking. Here's a question that a lot of people had from me, so let's just make sure that we get it all figured out. It says, what is shadow forking? A shadow fork is when a small number of nodes are configured to fork off from an Ethereum network at a certain point. In the context of the merge, we do this by launching nodes which are set to run through the merge at an earlier point than the entire network. This allows us to test how the upgrade would have happened in similar conditions to the shadow forked network, but without the vast majority of the nodes being aware this has happened. After the shadow fork, transaction valid on the main chain can get replayed on the forked chain as well, simulating the throughput of the original network. The diagram below from the linked thread shows what the network looks like after a shadow fork. And essentially you still have right here the main fork continuing the blocks. When it gets split off, you have your shadow block and then you have the beacon slot. So you essentially have your execution layer and your consensus layer, right? The top row of the Gorley, I don't actually know how to pronounce that, I should look that up, blocks shows a node on the canonical chain which are not aware of the shadow fork. The middle row shows a node on the shadow forked chain which has modified configuration telling it to fork once TTD is hit. The bottom row shows a beacon chain which was launched for the purpose of the shadow fork only. It will provide consensus to the chain when TTD is hit. So once again, what's happening here is not that we have the full execution layer being it's not here, right? It's here. It's still the same thing, sort of, essentially, and then you just have your consensus layer moved over to here. After TTD is hit, nodes with the modified configuration fork and run through the merge. The first post-merge block is produced by the next validator in the beacon chain. While this block can contain any transaction seen on the canonical chain, the exact transactions included or their ordering is not necessarily the same as on the canonical chain. Why are shadow forks useful? Shadow forks allow us to see how nodes react when the merge happens using only a small number of nodes and without disrupting the canonical chain. Shadow forks give us a more realistic environment to test in than launching new testnets because existing testnets already have transactions happening organically on them and a large state size and block history which put node under more stress than new testnets. They therefore allow us to get real-world performance metrics on nodes without potentially affecting the canonical network's operation. Can you shadow fork mainnet? Yes, and we have now. This is why we are talking about this today, is yesterday, obviously, mainnet was shadow forked. Shadow forking mainnet is incredibly useful because it shows us how nodes react in the harshest, excuse my alarm there, sorry. All right, where was I? Okay. In the harshest possible conditions, when their state and history is large and transactions are the most complex. After a mainnet shadow fork, we can also test how stable nodes are, how well they sync, etc. when trying to join the forked network. This gives us data not only on the transition itself, but also on how new nodes behave when they join the network in a post-merge state. And we're going to get to some really juicy stuff here with draws in a second because this is going to be important. But what stage in the process are shadow forks? Shadow forks help us increase our confidence that implementations work as expected. Once they go smoothly across all implementations, we can then confidently run existing testnets through the merge. It is worth noting that the nodes in the shadow forks are controlled by a small set of operators. Some public test networks have much broader validator sets. Once test nets are upgraded and stable, then we can plan for the merge to happen on the mainnet. And remember the timeline. That part's important. All of the test nets have to be upgraded first, and they would do that every 2 weeks. And that's why this timeline is going to be pushed out a little bit further than I think like anticipate. It's not like April 29th, they say, boom, ready to go, and they go. It's going to be like, okay, boom, that looked good. Now let's go and move all of the test nets over first, and then we'll move mainnet, right? So withdrawals. How will staking withdrawals actually work? And this is a big one, guys. So I've seen a couple of specs floating around, but I don't see anything with obvious consensus on it. If you look at the deposit contract, there is literally one right method, deposit. There is simply no logic for withdrawal. Yeah. Withdrawals will not be enabled at the merge. They will come in the fork after. Here's the current specification for them. Note, the approach for the execution layer is now confirmed to be EIP 4895 beacon chain push withdrawals as operations. Withdrawals don't go through the deposit contract. They are pushed by the beacon chain back to the execution layer and get credited in the same way as miner rewards currently do. This means that calculating circulating supply will be slightly more complex, as the deposit contract's balance will not decrease with withdrawals. How will withdrawal keys work? Using the ETH2 deposit CLI defaults, you don't automatically generate a BLS withdrawal key. How will this key work? Will you just take the zeroth index of the derivate, and I don't know why I'm stumbling, because I can say it in my head. Derivation path, whatever. Anyways, EIP 2334 defines this here. If you specify an ETH1 withdrawal key, can you only withdraw to that key's address, or is it simply used for signing a withdrawal transaction and the ETH you can withdraw to a specified address? To withdraw ETH from the beacon chain, you must specify an ETH1 address as the target recipient. You will not need to sign anything from this account, as the withdrawal will happen automatically from the execution layer perspective. When the withdrawal happens, it will look like the target account suddenly has the extra ETH in the account balance in the post state of the block containing the withdrawal. Suppose you use a BLS key to withdraw, where will the ETH go? My understanding is that the consensus layer will not have state or accounts. As such, do you simply specify an execution layer address to send withdrawn ETH to, or will the consensus layer actually have state? You specify an execution layer address to withdraw to and an amount to withdraw in the gas fees, GUI. See the spec. To be clear, you cannot withdraw with a BLS withdrawal key. We will have an operation to change your credentials on the consensus layer coming in the fork after the merge. Remember, big deal here. Staked ETH will not be able to be withdrawn post-merge. And this has to do essentially with the split between the consensus layer and the execution layer. And we can see that a little bit more clearly here. Obviously, this is with the shadow fork involved, but just consider this to be pre-merge and this to be post-merge, right? And then you can kind of basically start to get an idea of how that splits up. And then the execution layer will be here, and then the consensus layer would be here. I think that's the easiest way to explain it. Let me know if that makes sense to you. Big note being, though, of course, that's not happening. What else is not happening? Sharding. Is there any consensus on what sharding will look like in the future? It seems like execution sharding has been totally abandoned in favor of rollup centric future. This is important because what was sold for ETH 2.0 was, and obviously they changed the naming. Why did they change the naming? Well, they changed the naming because ETH 2.0 is coming in parts. it's not delivering everything as it originally stated. One of the things that was going to be big was going to essentially be sharding, allowing the scaling for the execution layers. That's not really happening anymore. They do have a different way, so we'll talk about that. But execution sharding has been deprecated in favor of roll-up centric scaling of execution. Data sharding is now the main approach being researched and implemented. How do rollups actually work post-merge? Do they still sit on top of ETH1, the execution layer, or will they sit directly on top of the consensus layer? And this is important too. They keep working as they do today, deployed on the execution layer, but can leverage consensus layer finality. Where does the data sharding currently sit? What actually is data sharding? Is there a way of solving data availability problem as rollups become more popular? The current plan is to first have it be exposed via a new transaction type as specified in EIP 4844, which has a full website with the FAQ here. And then this will also lay the groundwork for full implementation of sharding on separate P2P layer. The current proposed model for full sharding is explained here. I'm going to cover sharding though, and these EIPs in another video yet again, because it's changed dramatically since my last coverage of what it is or what it was. So really what it was supposed to be was a scaling solution for the consensus layer as well as the execution layer. That has now basically been ditched on the execution layer side in favor of using rollups. There are positives, there are negatives to this side. If you want to deep dive into those, there's plenty of discussions around. I will try to build a concise script for a video for you guys to give you an idea what the changes are, what the positives are for rollups versus, of course, that and so on. End of the day, what we do know is that withdrawals are not going to be available post-merge, and sharding is not going to be deployed post-merge. That is all going to be in separate EIPs later. So the only thing that is really happening is going to be the removal of proof of work in this case. And some of the problems that are going to be going on with that, of course, will be, well, obviously the miners voting up the default gas limit post-merge and having to put in a fix to basically accommodate for that. Then, like we talked about in my video, we're also going to have some issues with basically how miners react to everything that's going on with the merge and the timing of the difficulty bombs. In my humble opinion, if I was Ethereum in general, I would basically be trying, or just the devs in general, I would definitely delay the bomb, and then I would try to merge at an unexpected time. But that's a little difficult because they still have to let all the open source software know, all of the other devs know, so you can't really keep it in the box. So miners are going to find out pretty much no matter what. But the big stop, the big problem that they have between miners and how smoothly the merge goes is essentially when the difficulty bomb actually goes off. So in preference, you would want to basically merge without the difficulty bomb being a factor. And that's because once the difficulty bomb goes off, they get pressed for time. They have to make sure that they don't end up in a position where the block times are super, super long, and miners will have a direct effect on that. If they wanted to still deploy or go through the merge during basically a difficulty bomb going off, they would need more miners to hop on the network to accommodate for the increase in difficulty, which is an artificial increase, not even a real increase, right? Because if you have less miners and miners dropping off of the network while you're going through that difficulty bomb and trying to get to the merge, you're going to essentially have huge network issues where the block times are increased exponentially every 2 weeks. And we talked about this before. So it's a very tricky situation, I think, for them, but I think it's solved by essentially extending out the difficulty bomb and then doing it with sufficient time before the bomb. Like, I would have expected essentially maybe like 2 months ago, test nets to have started being moved over and forked if we were going to see this happen by June. So seeing that there's still more testing that needs to go on. There's still more bugs that need to go on and so on. That's kind of where we're at. Where's my confidence level in post-merge Ethereum? It's pretty low, I'm not going to lie. Some of the big factors, obviously, like we just talked about, no withdrawals. So you're going to have to wait for an EIP. That means if you're staking Ethereum and it's not staked in some sort of third party where, you know, you have a centralized exchange, if you're staking it directly, you've thrown 32 ETH in, you're not going to be able to withdraw it right after the merge. That's going to be a problem for sure. And I think artificially it may increase the price for a bit, right? Because nobody's going to be able to pull out. And then it's going to have just as bad of a time though once that EIP is implemented and people can withdraw, because then at that point I think there will be some hesitancy surrounding the staking. People are pulling out trying to make their money, and you'll see a dip. I think it's a very difficult thing when we're talking about the monetary policy changes and how this is going to affect Ethereum in general. The other problem is the best parts about what Ethereum was supposed to be going through post-merge or in Ethereum 2.0. Once again, I understand that that's not what they're calling it anymore. That's all marketing now at this point, changing the name. All the good stuff is seemingly going to the wayside, right? Using shards for scalability on the execution layer, you know, basically not needing the ETH1 as a shard for execution layer. Shards are not even coming for a while. They're only going to affect the consensus layer. There's like just some weird stuff. I'm not highly confident that it actually performs any sort of upgrades initially, like the merge. I don't necessarily think it does initially, unfortunately, other than, of course, gas fees coming down, which can happen. And obviously part of the problem that they were having was with those gas fees here. So right here. And that's kind of where we're at. Was it successful? As far as we can tell, yeah, it was successful on the mainnet. We'll have to wait till April 29th till we get confirmation on the All Core Devs call. And then once we kind of have all that information, we're going to have a better idea of the timing, and then just rewind this live stream if you came in late to really get the time to understand what we've laid out for the timing. End of story right now, though. Tim has said it will not happen in June. And due to the fact that they have to basically go through their game plan of deploying it every 2 weeks on the test nets, and that wouldn't even start till May, it wouldn't happen before. So it's not a troll, basically, from Tim. It means we're further out from June. How much further out? It could be only till July, or it could be further out, closer to like October, somewhere around there. All right, so let's get into mining profitability for the day. Hope you guys are up to date and everything's good. Mining profitability is up today from yesterday at, well, actually down today from yesterday. Sorry, excuse me, at $217.07 ETH. That does have to do with the price of ETH coming down. And then on top of that, we made $230 yesterday at 0.076 ETH. And that's kind of where we're at. Somebody did mine to my wallet for a brief time. Let's see if we can see it. Yep, right here. So thanks for the extra 5 gigahash for a little bit. So these numbers are a little off, unfortunately. So I can't really tell you exactly what that would be at. But that's kind of our predicted. It's not great. Like, mining profitability is definitely down. Seems to be mostly price influenced, not Ethereum in network influence, because we didn't see a reduction in the amount of Ethereum. We saw a reduction in the amount of US dollar that it converts to be clear. Then on Luck Pool, I'm still mining over here. I think we're still doing, between 1.5 and 2 Varus coin. Shout out to Real Regos for mining over there and kind of doing some donations. Look at all those shares. So that's super helpful, and thank you. And then let's go ahead and look at the 3090 and calculate this out. and update the Zell hash to the mini Z numbers for the 3090. And that's going to put us at $4.26 a day on ETH after power. And then once again, we have Zell hash on NiceHash at $2.94 a day after power, while directly mining Flux will be $2.72 a day after power. Still experiencing that same problem. Flux profitability, unfortunately, is very unpredictable right now from the mining perspective. Now, today, to be clear, I believe they finished the node halving, which is fantastic. I think that's going to be good. They're moving forward. I like the project. From the perspective of a miner, it's very difficult to go in and mine Zell hash because your income level, your revenue level is going to be just too unpredictable at this point. So hopefully that gets figured out. Now, Ethereum Classic, if you mine it directly, is at $2.79 a day after power. Most everything is down just due to the pricing. Ravencoin at $2.38 a day after power, and Ergo at $2.39 a day after power. And the Ergo problem, like we talked about before, is mainly the timing of the difficulty adjustment. So the delayed difficulty adjustment is delayed a little bit too long. So it ends up making it very unpredictable as well, where even if the hash rate looks low, but it was high for a little bit, the difficulty might be very high. And then it kind of keeps inversing right now, right? It keeps flipping to where, like, when the hash rate is low, the difficulty's high. When the hash rate is high, the difficulty's low. And then the miners jump off, and then it has this weird delay. So you see these bumps, and we can actually see that in the mining pool stats, which I can show you guys here, right here. And I think Ergo needs to do something about this, personally, because I don't think that it is functioning great right now. So as you can see, just like I said, a little bit low. So the difficulty's right here. The hash rate kind of spikes and it stays low. And then it spikes real high, right? But then it extends later. So this is like what? March 26th through the 29th, which would be before we can really look at it. Let's look at this then. So April 5th is when it dipped down again right here. April 5th, it dips down, then people kind of spike it up again. And then what is it? April 6th, difficulty starts increasing, and then up to today, right? So it's increasing and the hash rate is going down, but because of the delay, the difficulty is not going down. So you end up just having more and more people keep jumping off the network because of the delayed difficulty. Something needs to get done with that. Like, just something needs to be done with that. Hopefully, just talking about it, people start thinking about it. I'm not intelligent enough to know exactly what needs to be done with it. I can just see the problem. So, hey, Ergo devs, I think I see a problem there. Basically, it seems like the difficulty adjustment is delayed too long to where it's making it very unpredictable to mine, and it's causing problems for your network hash rate, which in turn would cause problems for the network security. So I think if you get that figured out, I think you could have a much more stable hash rate, because then the miners would be able to find where that hash rate needs to stay at to maintain their profitability while also maintaining your security. Taking a look at Bitcoin, we're at 224 exahash a second. No real changes there. Let's go ahead and look at Ethereum. We would expect 1 petahash on the network, and it's at 1.06 petahash a second on the network. So no big changes. Taking a look at Ethereum Classic, what we've seen here is once again, just a steady increase in difficulty that is now leveled out along with the hash rate leveling out, and that's at 28 terahash a second. This is what the charts need to look like, I think, for Ergo to be successful. Let's take a look at Flux, and once again, we talked about the problem with Flux. Problem with Flux right now is there just is a competing nature between the minting of new flux, which is the nodes versus the proof of work miners. And the noders basically utilizing nice hash, from the best that I can tell, to mine enough flux to purchase the next node. And what this is causing at this time is significant unpredictability within the network. That's why you see a ton of spikes here. And as a miner, like a dedicated infrastructure provider, you're much better off just pointing your rigs to nice hash for profitability and taking that than mining the coin directly. This isn't necessarily Flux's fault. Like, a lot of people are pro hybrid of some sort, which is node and proof of work. I'm not necessarily against it as long as it has a use case. I think in the case of Flux, it definitely has a use case. But we're starting to see, and this is the first time I think a coin that does this has been this successful. But what we're starting to see is the network effects on this, right? Which is a very inconsistent hash rate, very inconsistent profitability. And I just think that it's not good to point directly at Flux, even though that would be my preferred method for running a farm. It just makes it very unpredictable and kind of interesting though. Even in the difficulty spikes, they're all over the place as well, right? And that's why you're seeing that inconsistency. And it can cause some confusion, especially for newer miners. So understand that's what's happening. Basically, you're incentivized to earn as much flux as possible. And so renting on some place like NiceHash and quick spikes and getting enough for the next node is a valid strategy. And this is going to continue to be a problem, I think, on the network for a while. All right, so let's look at mining pool profitability. Last 90 days, Flex Pool in first, Mining Pool Hub in second, ZET in third. Two miners is not on the list at all anymore. I think the API is down. But for the last 60 days, ZET in first, Mining Pool Hub in second, Flex Pool in third. For the last 30 days, Flex Pool in first, Mining Pool Hub in second, ZET in third. For the last 21 days, Flex Pool in first, ZET in second, Ethermine in third. For the last 14 days, Flex Pool in first, Mining Pool Hub in second, Ethermine in third. For the last 7 days, Flex Pool in first, Mining Pool Hub in second, Ethermine in third. For the last 3 days, Crazy Pool in first, Flex Pool in second, Ethermine in third. For the last day, we have ZET in first, Ethermine in second, and Flex Pool in third. ASIC miner profitability. And let's just go ahead and refresh this. We have this Jazzminer X4 server that is still hitting the top of the charts at $118 a day. Yesterday it was $120. Obviously, we had a dip in mining profitability on Ethereum. The KD6 continues to drop lower. It's below $100 a day now at $94.61 a day. And that is similar to the KD5 because they're both the same thing. The Antminer L7 is at $40 a day, which is on NiceHash, which is more than likely basically what you would get if you were merge mining, because Doge is $35.30 here, and then you probably get an extra like $5 a Litecoin if you're merge mining. Scrolling down to the Antminer S19 Pro, which we like to check out every day, we have dropped even further to $13 a day after power on the S19 Pro. The Bitcoin mining barrier to entry is getting extremely difficult. And I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon. You're talking essentially just really, really, really extended profitability or ROIs on any of the equipment, and it's not really viable for a home miner, in my humble opinion, unless you're just going to go get one and solo mine and hope you hit a block, right? Like, it doesn't feel great to go purchase an S19 Pro right now, right? If we went to, like, I don't know, BT Miners, for example, and pulled up their pricing on the S19 Pro, it's $9,500, right? So ASIC miners have to come down some more. Because if you're going to be at 9,500 and only making like $13 a day after power, that's a 730-day ROI. It's pretty hefty. Even if you got kicked over to Flux or Ethereum Classic or something like that with a GPU, the ROI is still going to be better over there, even after the merge. So Bitcoin mining seems a little bit stressful. The Kadena miners, obviously, like if you're purchasing them for the $60,000 mark, is starting to look a little bit sketchy, and what you can jump over to. This is the problem with ASIC miners, right? KD6 right here in a package. This is a fun package, $66,000. So about $33,000 a pop, and you get a KD6 and an L7. But, right, that's $94. They've been declining in profitability. $94 here, and if you look at the L7, $40. So $130 a day for 66,000. And your ROI is 507 days on that one, so a couple years. But yeah, anyways, it's kind of what we're looking at. I still think I want some Bitcoin miners, some ASICs to hedge, right? But there's a lot moving around in the ASIC mining space, and it's almost like you want to wait till Intel's really out. But the problem with Intel is they're not really selling direct to consumer, and none of their third-party manufacturers are selling direct to consumer either. And a lot of the regulations that are getting put into place is making it to where you have to basically run a huge, massive public company to get funding to mine Bitcoin. And, it's turning into Ready Player One is essentially, I think, what's happening, if you guys get the reference. But let's go ahead and get to questions and answers. Remember, super chats are never required, always appreciated, and the first to be answered because they're the easiest to read. Then tag @SonOfATech to turn the text orange on my screen so that I know you're talking to me and I will be able to read it easier. All right, so let's start going through these. Ocean Blue says, @SonOfATech, thanks for putting this together and taking the time to explain it anytime. That's the job I do. Hopefully it makes sense. And Mr. Sola says, can you change your power cost back to 10 cents to keep continuity with previous streams? Yeah, I had changed it to 6 cents because I was looking at, obviously, for my farm. And we've been on that for a while now. We could swap back. What would be the most beneficial price point for power, do you guys think? Scott Schultz says, @SonOfATech, very informative episode. Got any financial advice? None. Emmanuel says, @SonOfATech, have you seen the 499 mini Bitcoin miner that Voscoin made a video about a couple days ago? I saw his video, but I didn't watch it yet. Detroit Irish says, @SonOfATech, any updates on your ASIC? Unfortunately, man, no. Now, BT Miners is kind of handling the communication between Koi Miner and me. So, and then they were, busy with Bitcoin Miami. So I will be calling the rep there, I think this week, again, trying to figure out what the status is. Status isn't good, especially because now the profitability has dipped so much and it's been down that even when I get it back, it's pretty rough, right? So it is what it is. Gabe says, @SonOfATech, any martial arts YouTubers you recommend? Jiu-Jitsu is really good. I mainly just do all the Jiu-Jitsu guys, not really outside of that. There's a few others, but I always forget their names. I could probably look up on my YouTube what I've watched in the past, right? But I Jiu-Jitsu is what I'll say right now. I like him a lot. So I'll give him a shout out. Let me get the channel here to share for you. He's kicking our butt in views, boys. As well he should. Andre says, at Son of a Tech, what do you think about Intel wants to buy Hive OS? I didn't hear about that yet, but if you could let me know, that'd be awesome. And yes, we were at 400 concurrent viewers. I've been wanting to get to that 500 concurrent viewer for a while now. Maybe one day, if we clickbait hard enough, we will. Jorge says, are you getting a Steam Deck? Of course I'm going to get a Steam Deck and mine on it. What do you think I am? That is a goal. But unfortunately, with the Steam Deck, they've, like, even though I pre-ordered it the day that they allowed pre-orders, for whatever reason, it says that my pre-order is not till, let me check and see if it's updated. I will not get it till Q3 of this year. So it says sometime between July and September. Everybody else is getting theirs. I pre-ordered it the day of, and they're just keep going out. So pushing it out for me. So unfortunately, that's I gotta wait. All Hashtag says, that's Son of a Tech, what is your total energy cost per kilowatt hour, including distribution charges? Yeah, it's so it's 5.5 cents in the winter, 6.5 cents in the summer. Golden Eye Forever says, ask Son of a Tech, if using quality parts, what is your level of concern regarding fire hazards during rigs 24/7? I'm just super paranoid, but I live in an apartment. Smoke detector could end this for me. So a few things that you should do no matter what that people will argue with me on, but for the sake of safety, it's going to be this. Better quality power supplies. Never use SATA. Never use Molex. It's the quick and dirty of it, right? And always make sure you're not over 80%. That's not over 80% the power capacity of your power supply, and not over 80% of the power capacity of the breaker you're connected to. If you do all that and you do all the math and you pay attention, nothing's going to happen. It's once you start going over that 80% rule or using components that are just known failure problems, SATA, Molex, get them out of your rig. Don't do it. If you want to argue with me, you can do it in the comment section, but I'm not going to condone it ever. It's just the way it is. Every single time it's a fire on a rig, it's Molex or SATA. Every single time. So just don't use them. And then don't worry about it. Always use 6 pins. The mag says, here, hold on. $10 super chat from Hawk Crypto Mining Company. Thank you, good sir. Andre says, ask Son of a Tech, do you think Kadena can be a good future like cryptocurrencies? I'm not sure I'm getting the full question there. I don't have a lot of faith in Kadena necessarily. It makes, I just don't have enough research though to speak on it. I think I need to do more research, I think is that's what I'm trying to say before I go too far into it. The mag says, as Son of a Tech, supply is 14 kilowatt plus delivery 10 kilowatt in Massachusetts. Gotcha. Dr. Bootygood says, as Son of a Tech, if you opted for the most expensive Steam Deck, I read that the low and mid-end models got priority. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I did do I didn't understand why I would want to pay money for a low-end one. And what is it? It was like 256 gigabyte for the medium level one, and bump up to 512 gigabyte on the large one. Of course, I wasn't sure if there was going to be expandable storage or not at first, so that was kind of part of my deal too. Boy, Matthew says, that's Son of a Tech, how much do you pay for rent at your farm? We've talked about that before. It's a scaling rent, but it'll be changing too. So right now it's like $1,600 a month, but it will be changing. and becoming more expensive due to they're going to roll in the 3-phase power and ventilation on the new building. So it'll be changing. SV Tech says, Ask Tech, can you help me understand what does the difficulty bomb going off mean? Mining will stop for that period. What is it? No. So we'll try. I've done a whole entire video about it. We reiterated on Sunday when we talked about it. Essentially, at the end of the day, I'm just going to pull up the definition that I have written in my Google Docs. It's my adjusted definition here, but it's an exponential artificial increase of difficulty every 100,000 blocks or every 2 weeks. What does that mean for you? It means that essentially, like if we went back to the difficulty charts on Ethereum, it's just every 2 weeks going to exponentially increase in difficulty. What does difficulty do? It does what it says. It increases the difficulty to mine a block. So that reduces your profitability. And since it's artificial and happening every 2 weeks, it's not in relation to the amount of hash rate on the network. So it's going to go up no matter what. Eventually what happens is it gets so difficult to mine that the reward incentives go down. So miners stop mining it, and thereby basically increasing the block times, which is the part that essentially Ethereum devs have to worry about with the bomb. Hopefully that makes sense. Daniel Gray says, as Son of a Tech, when do you think the merge will actually happen? We talked about it in the earlier in the video. Please rewind. I went over it very detailed today. Dep SN says, as Son of a Tech, can I use server fans in an open rig instead of 120 millimeter fans? Size of fans does not determine whether or not they're server fans. There are 120 millimeter server grade fans that will have a high CFM, very high speed, and very high noise as well, because the higher the CFM and the speed of the fan, the noisier it's going to be. There are 140 millimeter server fans. There are 80 millimeter server fans. And it depends on what your case situation is for which one you would decide to utilize. The only thing that you need to take into account when setting up your server fans in a traditional system is going to be the amount of power through whatever fan controller you're using, even to the point to where most motherboards will not have enough power, even if it's a 4-pin server fan that looks like it would plug into a motherboard. It doesn't necessarily supply enough power to run that fan. So you need to make sure that you're getting maybe a separate fan controller that does support the higher voltage that will be needed for the fans that you got, and then go from there. Let's see. Detroit Irish says, as Son of a Tech, the new ASRock Q270 requires Molex and SATA additional power connectors on the Mobo. If you run more than 3 PCI slots, are those okay to run, or just no Molex SATA on risers? A lot of motherboards will require the additional power. On the H110 Pro BTCs, you don't actually always need them. You can just bypass the little warning screen in the BIOS to go past it. I have before experienced on an ASRock H110 Pro BTC and a breakout board with a Molex extender that was powering those risers, melting wires. That has happened to me. So I understand that those requirements are there. I can say that one of the ways, obviously, that you would want to basically hedge against that is make sure the gauge on the wire is thick enough. But at the end of the day, any Molex and any SATA do have the capability of essentially failing, more of a capability. And even if it is just those additional ones to power. That's why when you see the additional power now on a lot of the newer mining motherboards or in one of the server case setups, they've moved to 6-pin. That is because of fire hazards on the Molex and the SATA additional powers on these mining motherboards. ERT Ted said, at Son of a Tech, watched the UFD Tech about storage mods on the deck. He just did 18 terabytes yesterday. Nice. Simon says that Molex is fine. Watts equals volt times amps, and Molex is 12 volt and is rated at 11 amps at 131 watts. Look, man, once again, we could go over the arguments and we could talk about it. In my experience, the number one cause of fires on rigs is going to be Molex and SATA. If you get the proper gauge wires. So you also have to take this into mind. Not every Molex cable is going to be created equally, and the gauge of the wire is going to have a direct effect on it. Okay? So just because the Molex standard should be able to support 131 watts doesn't mean that the cables are necessarily going to support that. And typically it's when those cables can't handle it that you have melting wires that turn into electrical fires. Charles says, ask Simon Tech, what is your payout set to 0.1 or higher? Yeah, it's just on the Bitcoin payout, so it just pays out every day. LH Gross says, ask Simon Tech, once ETH is unmineable, can ETH ASICs mine Ethereum Classic? It will be dependent on the ASIC you have. In most cases, the answer will be yes. You'll need to go through, of course, the manufacturer for a firmware update in some cases, in a lot of cases. So just be prepared for that. Look up the specific ASIC miner that you're considering picking up for Ethereum, and then double check and see if there's already a current firmware update for Ethereum Classic or not. Ocean Blue says, ask Simon Tech, you talk like you have a PhD. No, I am not. Have you heard me talk? I can't even pronounce names, bro. And today, for whatever reason, I couldn't even, I forget what, I couldn't even remember consensus layer today. It's hard. Kinlar says, at Son of a Tech, what is your favorite motherboard for new rigs now? Been using the TB360s with success, but working on some similar rigs, and the extra slots seem like a waste. I don't really have a favorite. I have ones that I don't like. Specifically, the older BioStar I did not like. That one broke. The Zotac B150 mining expert or whatever I didn't like. That one broke. The ones that haven't broken, let's see. The ASRock H110 Pro PTCs, those haven't broken in years. Yeah. Dan San says, at Sign of Attack, I have a 3080 Ti Founders on my gaming PC. And mining ETH get to 110 mem clock sometimes drops in hash rates. You added heat sinks, a fan, and it's 5 months GPU. How can you make it run cooler? Would you be really mad if I just told you the fact of the matter is you can't? Liquid cooling with an active backplate or immersion cooling. And I'm not even being facetious there. The best thing, like as of now, like what I have been doing is trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my 3090s. Because none of them will mine it. Like, I shouldn't say none of them. Even with modifications, very few of them will run at their full hash rate potential. And a lot of them overheat. Same with the 3080 Ti. The fact of the matter is that without some sort of active cooling on the memory modules, it's just never going to work. It's just never going to work. And then the cheap way to do it is use like copper plates from like Cool My GPU, which is a great product and awesome, but You do have the possibility of shorting out your GPU if you don't install it properly. You're putting additional pressure on the PCB, which in turn could reduce the longevity of the GPU. And you're definitely violating any warranty. So, yeah. Ruchin said, hi, Son of a Tech, did your farm spike to 10 gigahash yesterday? It did for a little bit. We talked about it today. So, if that was you, thanks. GeoS85 said, Professor Son of a Tech sound tidy. Boy Matthew says, as Son of a Tech, Bitcoin ASIC versus GPU rig, which one will you choose? Hash rate, power, price, all the same hypothetically. If it's all like, that would never be hypothetical, but I would still go GPU rig probably because I would have more options later on, right? James PT has a good tech tip. He says, check your splitters for a real 18 gauge wire. You've trashed a lot of Amazon, AliExpress cables for being labeled as 18 gauge and actually being 22-ish. Thanks for the tip. And you guys can use calipers for that too. I think we've talked about it in a couple of videos before. Telescopium says, as Son of a Tech, the failure point that causes the heat in the crimp of the pin or the plug on the wires and loosens between the pin and plug. Loose connection is more resistant, more heat, smoke, and fire. Right, and a lot of Molex connectors have that exact problem, right? They come loose a lot. Even when it'll happen when you're plugging them in. So while you're plugging those in, you want to be very careful. Make sure you're not pushing it out the back of the connector. Ghetto Squash says, S7 active backplates and full blocks add a lot of ROI time. Yep. On expensive cards. Best to trade the 3080 Ti for 3070s. Probably. Yeah. Hawk said, you getting my questions? No, I'm not. When was the last question? I saw your super chat and said thanks, but I haven't seen a question until that one. Andre said, ask Son of a Tech, in your opinion, which is the best GPU to mine flux between the 2060 Super and the 3060 Ti? I don't know, man. That's a good question. I haven't looked at it in a bit. Probably say the 3060 Ti, but my favorite flux mining GPU would be the 2080 Ti. Aways says, ask Son of a Tech, what is the maximum temperature a GPU should run on? Maximum temperature on mine is 64C. A few days back of the GPU blow and you don't know why. Please advise, what can I do? And is 64C bad? The problem is you're looking at the core temperature when you need to be looking at the memory temperatures. So 64C is not even a relevant temperature that you're looking at. Does that make sense? And if it blew up, then there probably also is something else wrong. Maybe with the system or the supply of power or your overclocks. I have never really seen, and I don't know what GPU it is. Or if you installed a copper plate and you did it wrong and it, shorted it out. I don't know why it blew on you, but I also know that that temperature is the core temperature and is irrelevant when we're mining for the most part. Pay Me in Crypto says that he would do the 2060 Super because it's more efficient than the 3060 Ti. But, yeah. Thanks for watching, guys. We're going to call it today. I'm going to head out for the workout for the day, and we will get going from there. Be sure to hit the like, comment, subscribe down below, and I will see you next Tuesday.